the point of the republic. And with the republic, what you see is that there is I think I pointed this out earlier, that there is a public and then there is a republic. That is as though the public is reissued, it is represented, and then you have the republic. So there is this element of representation. In this earlier pages, before that panopticism chapter, Foucault refers to this theorist Ernst Kantorowitz, and then really talks about how the polity is constituted under a monarchy. So there is the body of the king which perishes, the king can die, but there is something which goes beyond the actual life of the king or the queen, because the crown outlasts the king. And Foucault talks about that, and the relationship between the crown, which is supposed to last a long time, and the king who has a finite life. There's a whole kind of a ritual that he talks about. As you can see, a whole ritual that reaches its height in the coronation, the funeral, and the ceremonies of submission. So there's a way in which the body of the king connects with the crown, with the kingdom. So you see Kantorowitz. I'll just read this here. Can you see this? Is this text clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Kantorowitz gives a remarkable analysis of the king's body, a double body. You see, there's a double body, because it's the body of the king himself, the actual physical body, but also the body which is the larger one of the kingdom. So the king's body, a double body, according to the juridical theology of the Middle Ages. Juridical because, of course, there has to be a juridical framework within which the larger public gets constituted, not the public. Say, in the case of the kingdom, it's the king and his subjects. So the kingdom to get constituted, like Raja or Praja jo hota hai na? So the Praja has to get constituted, so the kingdom has to form. So according to the juridical theology of the Middle Ages, since it involves not only the transitory element that is born and dies, but another that remains unchanged by time and is maintained as the physical yet intangible support of the kingdom. So, so he builds that, but that is with regard to the physical body, the perishable, finite body of the king, and then the crown and the kingdom. But there is another relationship that Foucault points out here, following Kantorowitz, which is the one with the condemned man. Because here at the opposite pole, one might imagine placing the body of the condemned man. He too has his legal status. So what is the relationship here? Because you see, unlike in the disciplinary mechanism of power, unlike in the panopticon model, where there is this individualized subjection, if you like, where the individuality is kind of maintained, because it's not by shoving someone in the darkness, repressing him or confining him through a prohibitive no kind of a injunction, but by allowing certain forces and desires within the subject to be excited. That is what the disciplinary mechanism does through modulation, through regulation, through the tactical partitioning, and all of that we saw earlier. So the relationship in a democracy under capitalism with the citizen, with this kind of a disciplinary mechanism of power in biopolitics, as it is called, is very different from the condemned man under monarchy, where there is a direct torture, where the mechanisms of power are coercive, and we will see later there is also a spectacle, that the torture and the punishment and the hanging would be like a spectacle, like for everyone to see. All the entire crowd will gather, and then someone will be executed, right? We know that happens in a feudal monarchical kind of a system. So the relationship with the condemned man, with the body of the condemned man, is very important here. So Foucault says, at the opposite pole, one might imagine placing the body of the condemned man. He too has his legal status. He gives rise to his own ceremonial, and he calls forth a whole theoretical discourse. not in order to ground the surplus power. You know, there's the surplus power because the king, through all his rituals and all this coronation and all the pomp and the show, climbing on a decorated elephant, you know, right? The pomp, the grandeur of the palace, you know, all of that, which creates that semblance of surplus power of the king. Um, uh, so what's going on here? So he gives rise to his own ceremonial, that's the condemned man, and he calls for the whole theoretical discourse, not in order to ground the surplus power possessed by the person of the sovereign, but in order to quote the lack of power with which those subjected to punishment are marked. In the darkest region of the political field, the condemned man represents the symmetrical inverted image, inverted figure of the king. So just as with the king's excess points towards another direction. Similarly, the subjection, not the excess, but the subjection, not the excess, but the negation, you know, the diminution of the condemned man happens at the other end. So that represents the symmetrical, the kind of a mirror image of the symmetrical invert. So not the mirror image, but this is the inverted symmetrical figure of the king. We should analyze what might be called in homage to Kantorowitz the least body of the condemned man. Right? Now, this is what is there before the disciplinary mechanism of power has come. Right? Are you guys seeing the thing how Foucault is building and coming towards disciplinary mechanism of power? You can say in a way this person is kind of connected with the model of the great confinement. You know, with the leper. वो जो कोड़ी का जो बोल रहे थे ना उनको अंधेरे में धकेला जाता है, वो डंजन में ये है, उसका एक तरह का उसका लेवल का चीज है ये, है ना? इस टाइप का शासन प्रणाली का साथ ये मेल खाता है जो यहाँ पे हम देख रहे हैं कैंटोरोविच वाला जो पैसेज में ये है, ठीक है? But now you see, I think he goes ahead, and then we come to the specific thing of the disciplinary power. If the surplus power possessed by the king gives rise to the duplication of his body, has not the surplus power exercised on the subjected body of the condemned man given rise to another type of duplication? What is going on here? So the surplus power possessed by the king gives rise to the duplication of his body. That's the king's body. Has not then the surplus power exercised on the subjected body of the condemned man given rise to another duplication? So there is the condemned man, the least body of the condemned man. Does it also not produce a duplication? Does it also not produce another realm, another sphere, another register of subjection? For example, say we might say, when it comes to governmentality, biopolitics, and all of that, the subjection of life, we can say that there is another realm which is defined to make that possible, which is say the constitutional discourse of rights and liberty and all of that, right? वो बोल सकते हैं ना हम कि so there is a, say for example, if we were to say, imagine if we were to say there is disciplinary power, right? So we can say, so along with that, there is political sovereign power, right? So this is say the constitution. So you can say that this is the doubling, you know. You can say this is the doubling. So one is disciplinary power. So one is disciplinary power, and a kind of a doubling of disciplinary power happens, but not an exact doubling of disciplinary power. But to kind of put this in place, there has to be some other kind of support, like the absent basis as it is called. Let's say this is the basis of disciplinary power, right? Which one? This one. So here the main things are, let me make bold, both of them bold. Okay. Right? We are talking about the relationship between disciplinary power and juridico-political sovereign power, right? So this kind of a doubling, so think of it that way. Huh? So similarly, so that doubling happens with the king, the duplication of his body, But similarly, has not the surplus power exercised on the subjected body of the condemned man given rise to another type of duplication, another kind of doubling? Now, what is the doubling that duplicates that of a non-corporal, a soul, right? So a soul kind of a thing is kind of there, It's like you are standing and on top of is a ceiling, the soul, the non-corporal, a soul, but soul is within quotes. That means it is not really the Atma that we think, and of course, Foucault will clarify later that the soul is not really the one which you hear in religion or something which you might, from a critical theory perspective, think of as something illusory. No, it's not really that. So he says the history of this microphysics of the punitive power. That means the soul is like the correlate of the microphysics of the punitive power. The history of this microphysics of the punitive power would then be a genealogy or an element in a genealogy of the modern soul. Don't worry, this will be clear. Rather than seeing this soul as the reactivated remnants of an ideology or of religion or of all that, one would see it as the present correlative of a certain technology of power over the body. So for this disciplinary mechanism of power, for this condemned man, which of course will soon become a citizen, right, with rights under democracy, for that to be possible, a correlate is required, which is the soul, which he calls the soul, which is not the same as the soul and the Atma that you hear elsewhere. It would be wrong to say that the soul is an illusion or an ideological effect. On the contrary, it exists, it has a reality. It is produced. Permanently around. Now look at this. Where does the soul exist? It is produced permanently around the body, on the body, within the body, by the functioning of a power that is exercised on those punished. And in a more general way, on those one supervises, right? And then he goes on to talk about the reality reference. So there's a reality and there is a reference. So now look at this, some of these keywords in order for you to crack this text. I'll just directly go to those keywords. One is the reality reference, okay. The other is again this word reference is here. Look at that, and then there are these articulated the effects. So the soul. So what is the soul here then? Here you see this real non-corporeal soul is not a substance. It is the element in which are articulated the effects of a certain type of power. What is it? It is an element in which are articulated the effects of a certain type of power. So in a way, the soul is not the same as disciplinary power. It sometimes looks like he's talking about the mechanism of disciplinary power. Think about the panopticon, which is not very feeble, which is very light. Those or like fictional, right? Do you guys remember that passage where he talks about that there is it's something it is something fictional, but a fictional which has real effects. Have you any of you noticed that passage? I think it's in the panopticism chapter. You remember the passage where it says that it's very light, that there's an economic geometry to it, पता है भाई किसी को?
Sir.
Yeah, so it's not verifiable. What
Yes,
did I
sir.
say? It is non-verifiable. What is the other one I just said? It is
Visible. Visible.
uh,
It is
sorry.
visible but unverifiable.
Yeah, it's unverifiable. Say again. It is. What is that phrase?
Visible, sir, visible.
Unverifiable. And then what was the other one I said? What was I saying just now? क्या था? क्या बोल रहे थे?
Geometry, economic geometry.
Yeah, economic geometry. It is very light. Oh, it is like a fiction which has real effects. Okay. Remember? So now these are features which you would maybe associate with the soul. No, fictionalized. Right? Soul is also fictional, right? It's like a spiritual something which we don't know what it is really. You see here, when I put the word fiction, we know, for example, how many real procedures undermine the legal fiction of the work contract. Again, the word fiction is used. This is again fiction here. By the fiction of a juridical subject. What would that mean? Juridical subject is a fiction. The constitutional subject is the constitution a fiction? फिर बताओ, like you guys know about written and unwritten constitutions, है ना? Does it mean that by
Yes, sir.
fiction that it is unwritten? No, it doesn't mean that. Okay, yeah, a real subjection is born mechanically from a fictitious relation. So it looks like sometimes that he's trying to like call the panopticon model of power, which is like this, light and fictional and unverifiable. Like soul is also unverifiable. No, if I tell you, you show me a soul, मुझे आत्मा का फोटो दिखाओ, आप आत्मा का फोटो दिखा पाएंगे क्या मुझे?
No, sir.
तो वो
No,
फिक्शनल है
sir.
तो क्या? या तो so is you trying to suggest that because power is dispersed, is everywhere, it is like a soul or it is like a spirit or something, but when we actually see that section here, you see, this is when I need your help. कौन सा पेज था वो? 29 है तो क्या कौन सा पेज था वो?
Sir, that talks about economic geometry. वो वाला page.
नहीं अभी जहाँ थे, अच्छा ये ओके या सो okay yeah so this so this is the historical reality of this soul, which unlike the is not born this thing. This real non-corporal soul is not a substance. Substance means that it would be something real you can touch and feel and all of that. So it's not a substance. It is the element in which are articulated the effects of a certain types of power has certain effects. Those effects create this soul, right? Right. This is what this sentence means. आप लोग देखिए. Please help me. It is the element in which are articulated the effects of a certain type of power and the reference of a certain. So it is also the reference of a certain type of knowledge. This non-corporal thing, this thing that you can't picture, the machinery by which the power relations give rise to a possible corpus of knowledge, and the knowledge extends and reinforces the effects of this power. जैसे होता है ना मंत्र, होता है ना मंत्र, पूजा कर रहे तो मंत्र पढ़ते हैं ना, तो आप बोल सकते हैं भाई
Yes, sir.
पंडित जी आप क्यों मंत्र पढ़ रहे हैं, आप मत मंत्र पढ़िए, हैं? आप बस वो ऐसा वैसा जो होता है ना, यहाँ घी डालना है वहाँ क्या डालना है वो करते रहिए, ये कर्म कांड। लेकिन वो मंत्र एक इफेक्ट क्रिएट, एक माहौल बनाता है? कुछ इस टाइप का है ये सोच, मुझे तो ऐसा लग रहा है, आप लोग बताइए, है ना? वो माहौल बता रहा है लेकिन उसका इफेक्ट्स रियल होता है। या मंत्र करते हैं, या आप चर्च में भी प्रेयर करते हैं ना चर्च में जाके, तो आप बोल सकते हैं नहीं प्रेयर क्यों करना। जैसे आप ये लोटस टेम्पल में जाते हैं ना, लोटस टेम्पल में कोई गया है क्या दिल्ली में?
Yes, sir. Yes.
तो लोटस टेम्पल इफ यू गो, व्हाट डू? दे से
Yes, sir.
they say please be quiet when you enter that central hall, remember? So no prayers, nothing. They say just be quiet, just silence, you know, and that silence has an effect. So the silence is just silence, it's empty, it's maybe emptier than a fiction. Silence also you can say is unverifiable, you know, नीरवता बोलते हैं ना, silence, एकदम शांत, कुछ आवाज ही नहीं हो रहा है, कुछ भी नहीं है, एम्प्टीनेस है? लेकिन उसका तो इफेक्ट रियल होता है ना। तो लेकिन आप चर्च में जाएंगे तो बोलेंगे प्रेयर करो, वो प्रेयर करते हैं, वो बाइबल पढ़ते हैं, वो प्रेयर है वो सब। आप मंदिर में भी जाएंगे तो वहाँ मंत्र पढ़ा जाता है, वहाँ भी प्रार्थना होता है, आरती होता है, उसका एक इफेक्ट होता है, म्यूजिक का एक इफेक्ट होता है इंसान पे। आप ऐसा म्यूजिक एक धुन सुनेंगे तो आपको पूरा आप ये हो जाएंगे। तो कुछ इस टाइप का चीज है ना, जो सोल हम कहला रहे हैं, यानी कि बॉडी के साथ ना, बॉडी जो है ह्यूमन बॉडी, जो सिटीजन का जो बॉडी है, जो सिटीजन का बात हो रहा है ना यहाँ, तो उस बॉडी में से इस ढंग से उस बॉडी के ऊपर इस ढंग का एक इफेक्ट्स होता है। हाँ, वो पैनोप्टिकॉन है, और यहाँ पे उसको वो सोल बोल रहे हैं, बट इट इज समथिंग विच इज प्रोड्यूस्ड on this reality reference. You see, it is a reality reference. So there is reality, there is body, there is real things, and then there is a reality reference, which is the sound or the music or the soul or something which does not look very corporal. So there is the corporal, which is the body, and then there is the non-corporal, right? You know, ये तो थोड़ा आध्यात्मिक जैसा लगता है, लेकिन ऐसा है नहीं, and that is really the trick, where the what looks like the spiritual and the soul like thing actually is something produced by techniques, produced by material things, produced by the body, arranged in a particular way, and that is the panopticon. The panopticon is really giving you that composition, that architectural arrangement, which then produces all of these effects, you know, all of these reality references, all of these articulations, right? So on this reality reference, various concepts have been constructed and domains of analysis carved out: psyche, subjectivity, personality, consciousness, ये जो बोलते हैं ना, all these are placed somewhere else. Now do a quick short circuiting here. Imagine if you were to say, okay, what is happening in popular culture, modern culture today? So there is one celebrity who is like having millions of followers, and you have all these people. Now think of this, you know, the Kantorowitz model, where there is the king with all his rituals and all of that, and then there is the condemned man, and then there is the spectacle, you know, to which everybody has to participate. The condemned man is killed or hanged, and everybody will clap. There is blood, there is killing, and through that the king manifests his power over the people, that only he has the right to kill someone, right? That's how the king establishes his rule. That is how the king establishes the 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 relationship with the subjects, through this control over the power to kill. So, and then that is kind of overturned, you might say, in the case of a democracy, in the case of, say, capitalism, where now this condemned man will not be kind of, you know, subjected directly, you know, to this kind of a coercive violence of the king, through which the king establishes his sovereign power over the masses, over the subjects, but where the body is now sacrosanct, right? Where on the body will work only the soul kind of a thing, not the coercive violence, right? This is what disciplinary mechanism is. है कि नहीं? ये सोल टाइप का एक चीज ही काम कर रहा है ना उसके ऊपर। तो सब्जेक्शन कैसे हो रहा है डेमोक्रेसी के अंदर में? नॉट थ्रू द राइट ऑफ द किंग टू किल समवन, बट द एबिलिटी ऑफ द सॉवरेन to enable life, to enable the powers of the body to kind of flourish in such a way that is coherent with the kind of model of power which panopticon is giving, the kind of model of power which is unverifiable, which is light, which is fictional, right? So the entire way in which the republic is constituted and the place of the individual in that is completely different here, right? Do you see what is going on? So what Foucault is doing here is that he's completely revising this and seeing that under a democracy, the way in which the republic is constituted, the way in which the polity is constituted, as it is called, that completely changes here. I'll quickly take you to some other passages which will clarify this. And let me just and you will see, that you will see that this point becomes even clearer. So just have some patience for another few minutes. I will take you to this other passage, and this will take us to page 216. Let me find it, and then I will hopefully flash it here. Yeah, I think I got it. Okay. So, yeah. Okay, so you can see. Yes? You're saying something?
So actually, yes. So actually, I couldn't understand the duplicacy of power. Like
ठीक है,
how
we'll come to
the
that.
power
We'll come
of
to that. We'll come to that. We'll come to that.
okay.
We'll come to that. So here you see, just as that, just now we saw the duplication and the way in which the soul, um, the soul works like a reality reference and creating all these effects, and that defines the way in which the polity is constituted, and really the place of the individual, who is now subjected in that particular way through this disciplinary mechanism of power, the way that individual is placed and the way that individual is connected. Now you will see there is a, okay, think about this now, before we go into this, you saw this, that I was telling you that the spectacle is very important for monarchy, right? द स्पेक्टिकल, एक तमाशा करते हैं ना, कि राजा महाराजा वो किसी को जिसको फांसी में लटकाना है उनको भारी इसमें टाउन के बीच में लाके सभी के सामने में वो करते हैं, है ना? हमारे यहाँ भी ये डेमोक्रेसी के अंदर में कैपिटल पनिशमेंट होता है तो थोड़े उनको लाके जंतर मंतर में उधर रामलीला मैदान में, जैसे अच्छा, जैसे होता है ना आपका रावण दहन होता है, रावण दहन तो पता है ना, द बर्निंग ऑफ द एफिजी ऑफ रावण।
Yes, sir.
वो
Yes,
तो
sir.
सब लोग भारी मैदान में करते हैं ना,
Yes,
भारी मैदान में करते हैं कि नहीं? हाँ, कुछ इस टाइप का है मामला। वो पुराना पावर का मॉडल है, वो भगवान श्री राम का पावर है वो। भगवान श्री जो जितने भी भगवान का पावर ऐसा दिखाया जाता है कि हम जो जिसको हम नहीं चाहते हैं, जिसको हम अछूत मानते हैं, जिसको हम क्रिमिनल मानते हैं, वो सही में है कि नहीं वो अलग बात है, तो उसको हम पूरा सभी के सामने में हम ऐसा करेंगे। लेकिन डेमोक्रेसी कैपिटलिज्म के अंदर में क्या है, जो पावर का जो मैकेनिज्म है ना, वो बोलता है कि नहीं हम छुपा के करेंगे इसको। भाई क्यों छुपा के कर रहे हो? जो करना है खुलेआम में करो ना। क्यों अंदर में जाके भगत सिंह को तुमने फांसी लगाया? तुम बाहर लाके करते सबके सामने में, तो ब्रिटिश अपना पावर दिखाते। क्यों नहीं भाई ब्रिटिश ने अपना पावर दिखाया? क्यों वो छुप के फिर अलग से किया? वो भी फिर वो झूठ बोलते हैं वो, कि भाई वो परसों का डेट देंगे ना, फिर आज ही कर देते हैं सुबह। करते हैं कि नहीं ऐसा? आज कितना तारीख है? आज 11 तारीख है, तो बोलेंगे कि उनका फांसी 15 तारीख सुबह को होगा, फिर कल 12 तारीख सुबह ही कर देंगे। ये करते हैं ना। तो ये जो है कि अभी का जो है, तो इसका लॉजिक अलग है, आपको समझना पड़ेगा। डेमोक्रेसी का लॉजिक अलग है। जो राजा महाराजाओं का रूल था, मोनार्की का जो रूल था, उसमें स्पेक्टेकल होता था। स्पेक्टेकल मतलब तमाशा। तो इसको लेके यहाँ पे आपको कुछ कुछ ये दिखेगा। अम, 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 अच्छा, यहीं पे देख लेते हैं। So Julius, some writer from that period, from a long time ago, Julius saw as a fulfilled historical process that which Bentham had described as a technical program. Bentham के लिए तो वो technical program था। अच्छा, यहाँ पे शायद और है। अच्छा, okay. So a few years after Bentham, Julius gave this society its birth certificate. Speaking of the panoptic principle, he said there was much more there than architectural ingenuity. It was an event in the history of the human mind. In appearance, it is merely the solution of a technical problem, but through it, a whole type of society emerges. Antiquity had been a civilization. Okay, so now we're talking about antiquity, right? Not exactly feudal, but antiquity. Even the period. जैसे ग्लैडिएटर मूवी देखा है ना आपने? तो ग्लैडिएटर में वही होता है। वो स्लेव्स को बोलते हैं कि जाके एक जानवर के साथ वो लड़ेगा और सब लोग बैठ के देखेंगे, एक तमाशा करेंगे। और उसके थ्रू एक तरह का जो पावर है, एक तरह का जो राजा महाराजाओं को जो पावर है, उसको फिर एस्टैब्लिश किया जाता है। So to render accessible, now this is about antiquity, to render accessible to a multitude of men the inspection of a small number of objects. देखिए क्या है? To render accessible. This is antiquity, the old model of power. What happens in that? To render accessible to a multitude of men the inspection of a small number of objects. So lot of multitude of men, lots and lots of men will gather and they will. There's a lot of sound coming from there. So a lot of people will gather and they will all watch a small number of objects. बहुत बड़ा भीड़ आके एक जो घटना है उसको देखेंगे। वो कैसे करना, वो एंटिक्विटी का प्रॉब्लम था। ठीक है, दिस वाज द प्रॉब्लम टू विच द आर्किटेक्चर ऑफ टेम्पल्स, so temples is designed like that. So you have crores of people, lakhs of people who just throng one temple, one theater. सब वैष्णो देवी जाते हैं, है ना। सब राजा महाराजा का जो तमाशा है वो देखने जाते हैं, है ना। वो थिएटर में भी वैसा है, सर्कस में भी वो है। विद स्पेक्टिकल, which is this kind of thing, there was a predominance of public life, the intensity of festivals, sensual proximity, जैसे मेले में होता है। क्या होता है? Predominance of public life. You see the public life, are you guys able to follow all of this? Of course, it's very simple, right? We're just talking about like real empirical kind of facts at one level. So the public life is very direct in that. You see, don't forget, in a democracy, because we are individual private citizens with fundamental rights, so when we go to a mela, it is as though, and it's completely optional for us, right? Unless maybe you are going to vote in the elections. But even in the voting in the elections, you really go as private citizens. And there is a secret ballot. Nobody should know what you are really doing. So in a way, when you go and vote in the elections, it's far from a. It is a electoral. In some senses a public process, but at the same time, the private character of the citizen is reinforced through the very mechanism of the elections. So even though it is public, it is still reinforcing, the private citizen, as against this that we are seeing here, which is the spectacle, where in antiquity or in the under the earlier forms of power, where there's a predominance of public life, the intensity of festivals, sensual proximity, in these rituals in which blood flowed. What does this mean? In these rituals in which blood flowed, मतलब क्या होता है? बताओ क्या होता है? वो बलि बलि चढ़ता है ना उसमें, कहीं बकरा काटा जा रहा है, कहीं कुछ हो रहा है, कहीं फेस्टिवल हो रहा है, हैं? या किसी वो भोग चढ़ाते हैं ना, भोग। काली माँ को क्या चढ़ाते हैं? भोग चढ़ाते हैं कि नहीं? है ना, सैक्रिफाइस होता है, ह्यूमन सैक्रिफाइस तो हिंदुस्तान में भी होता था. Lot of people say that Buddhism was a response against the kind of human practices performed in society earlier. That was one of the things that the Buddha was doing, trying to end human sacrifice. I mean, that's one of the interpretations of the rise of Buddhism, right? Look at the way Gautam Buddha bolte hai, sorry, Samrat Ashok. Samrat Ashok, why did he change his path according to the conventional story? Because he
He
saw
said
all this
that
blood. Yeah,
there was
yeah,
a huge masses of the who die before
yeah,
who die no.
yeah.
Yes.
So he was moved by.
Yeah, by the kind of blood and all that. So I think it is not just, we are told it's a war of Kalinga. Maybe it was not just a war of Kalinga, that one war. I think there was a larger culture of human sacrifice, animal sacrifice. अश्वमेधा वो जो होते हैं ना, घोड़ों को sacrifice करते हैं, हाँ? अश्वमेध यज्ञ होता था ना? Have you
Yes, sir.
guys heard of अश्वमेध यज्ञ?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, यज्ञ means, what does यज्ञ mean? यज्ञ का अर्थ क्या होता है? यज्ञ is some kind of
आहुति
sacrifice. आहुति, हाँ, आहुति देना. मैंने वो उसको फेंक दिया आग में, वही है आहुति. ओम स्वाहा बोलते हैं ना? ओम स्वाहा बोलते हैं कि नहीं?
Yes, sir.
ओम
yes sir.
स्वाहा में क्या होता है? वो आग में जल के राख हो जाता है, आहुति होता है उसमें, है ना? So in these rituals, all that is happening in the public thing, it's not a private thing. So in these rituals, in which blood flowed, society found new vigor. यज्ञ किया तो बहुत अच्छा, अभी सब हो गया, आपका जो खराब ग्रह है सब खत्म हो गया. Society found new vigor and formed for a moment a single great body. Look at this. Are you seeing this sentence? In these rituals, so how is the kingdom, how is the प्रजा और राजा का जो संबंध कैसे constitute हो रहा है? देखिए, in these rituals in which blood flowed, society found new vigor and formed for a moment a single great body. So not through the constitution, not through rights, not through disciplinary power, none of that, not through the private citizen, but through these kind of things. The modern age poses the opposite problem. Now, when you come to the modern period, now the problem is opposite. The earlier one, the problem was to render accessible, how to render accessible to a multitude of men the inspection of a small number of objects. Whereas here, in the modern age, there's an opposite problem, to procure for a small number, or even for a single individual, the instantaneous view of the great multitude. Right? The small minority of people, they want to now view the great multitude, but that is a tough one. Because the great multitude are kind of now endowed with rights, they are individualized, right? So they're not going to offer themselves like this into a mela or into a spectacle like this. So how will you make that possible? How will you? This is the problem of democracy. To procure for a small number or even for a single individual the instantaneous view of a great multitude in a society in which the principal elements are no longer the community and public life, but on the one hand, private individuals, and on the other, the state. So the state, the private individuals. In such a situation, relations can be regulated only in a form that is the exact reverse of the spectacle. वो जो सामूहिक जो तमाशा होता था, सामूहिक तमाशा, मेरा हिंदी आप लोगों को अच्छा लग रहा है? थोड़ा प्रेज भी कीजिए कभी कभी.
Yes,
जो
sir. Yes.
पब्लिक जो पब्लिक स्पेक्टेकल जो पब्लिक स्पेक्टेकल है ना, उसका रिवर्स हो रहा है यहाँ पे. And the other, the state, the state, relations can be regulated only in a form that is the exact reverse of the spectacle. It was to the modern age, to the ever-growing influence of the state, to its ever more profound intervention in all the details and all the relations of social life, that was reserved the task of increasing and perfecting its guarantees by using and directing towards that great aim the building and distribution of buildings intended to observe a great multitude of men at the same time, and that's a panopticon. It was to the modern age, to the ever-growing influence of the state, to its ever more profound intervention in all the details and all the relations of social life, that was reserved the task of increasing and perfecting its guarantees by using and directing towards that great aim the building and distribution of buildings intended to observe a great multitude of men at the same time. ठीक है, और थोड़ा ये दो तीन लाइन और पढ़ लेते तो इससे और क्लियर होगा. Julius saw as a fulfilled historical process that which Bentham had described as a technical program. Okay, now see, our society is one not of a spectacle but of surveillance. Now this kind of seems clear, but now look at this sentence. Under the surface of images, one invests depths, bodies in depth. Behind the great abstraction of exchange, there continues the meticulous. You see, there, because at one level, and as Marx famously said in Capital, he said, you know, I think that's the one of the first, or maybe the first line of Marx's Capital, Karl Marx का जो पूंजी है, उसका बारे में बात कर रहा हूँ मैं, where Marx said capitalism or capital appears initially in the first instance as an immense accumulation of commodities. Right? What do you see in capitalism first? You see things, commodities. You see nice cars, you see expensive jewelry. Like when you walk into a city, what do you see? You know, that's what you see. You know, all those things maybe which you can't buy, but you see there. You see the visibility is there. They're all displayed. Stores बोलते हैं ना, जैसे आप मॉल में जाते हैं, हाँ? तो मॉल में आप खरीद भी नहीं पाते हैं उन सब चीजें, लेकिन सब आपको दिख तो रहा है. है ना, सब तो दिख रहा है आपको. So the image is there, you can see it, and all these things are meant for exchange, for buying and selling. One primary work which takes place in modern society is exchange, but the exchange relation is an abstract thing. So you are not very rich, but suddenly you got a lottery, so you have a lot of money, suddenly you go and buy a Mercedes car. Exchange kiya na apne, that's exchange. You give money, you are given that. But it is an abstract thing because it has no connection with who you are, what is your actual situation, what is your actual purchasing power. Just by chance, if you get a lot of money, you can indulge in it, right? So in a way, this is also very liberating because you are not always referred back to your social background or your basis or something. You know, paisa bolta hai यहाँ. Great abstraction of exchange मतलब पैसा बोलता है. हाँ? वो होता है ना, पैसा पैसा. वो एक गाना भी है ना, बाप बड़े ना भैया, the whole thing is that सबसे बड़ा रुपया. सुना है आप लोगों ने ये? तो बाप भैया ये तो एब्स्ट्रैक्ट नहीं है ना, ये तो कॉन्क्रीट में होता है, बाप भैया बेटा बेटी है, लेकिन सबसे बड़ा रुपया, रुपया से फिर आप तुरंत कुछ भी कर सकते हैं, वो एक एब्स्ट्रैक्ट लेवल पे चला जाता है, उसका कोई एक रियल रेफरेंस नहीं भी हो सकता है, हो भी सकता है, नहीं भी हो सकता है. सो बिहाइंड द ग्रेट एब्स्ट्रैक्शन ऑफ एक्सचेंज देयर कंटिन्यूअस, तो वो तो एक्सचेंज का लेवल में है, यानी कि किसी का भी अगर पैसा आ गया ना, कच्चा पैसा, गर्म पैसा, तो वो तुरंत वो कुछ भी कर सकता है, लेकिन सिर्फ वो लेवल से तो नहीं चलेगा ना. एक्चुअल मेहनत भी होता है, एक्चुअल मजदूरी का भी काम हो रहा है, एक्चुअल शोषण का भी काम हो रहा है, दमन का भी काम हो रहा है, पूंजी में सब तो मस्ती नहीं हो रहा है. So behind the great abstraction of exchange, there continues a meticulous, concrete training of useful forces. The circuits of communication are the again that kind of a duplication kind of a thing. जो पहले उस time हम लोग बोल रहे थे ना, in that earlier passage that we read, it feels like the same kind of a duplication here. On the one hand, you have the great abstraction of exchange. It's a bit like the relationship between exchange and production in Marx. बोलते हैं ना वो MCM, CMC. The MCM is just the money flow. but there's a capital flow which involves real production, whereas money flow is only the level of circulation and exchange. So behind the great abstraction of exchange, there continues the meticulous, concrete training of useful forces, the circuits of communication. Now, you see, circuits of communication are the supports of an accumulation and a centralization of knowledge. Now, this, of course, you can completely refer to today's social media, Facebook, and all that, which is just meant for communication and exchange of information and all that. But that is also a process of accumulation. These days, some of the richest people are people who are owning all these Facebook and all these tech companies. So they are saying it is just for communication, and in fact, it is in a way just for communication, where people communicate with each other. You can share pictures on Facebook, you can share videos on Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram and all of that, and yet the accumulation of wealth is also taking place, right? So how is it that when people are apparently supposedly free service लगता है ना, Facebook तो free है, to get Facebook you are not paying money, are you? You are not. And yet, when you use this service, which is apparently supposedly for free, somebody else makes a lot of money. It almost sounds paradoxical. So how is that happening? And that's precisely what Foucault is pointing out here. The circuits of communication are the supports of an accumulation and a centralization of knowledge. The play of science defines the anchorages of power. Just science, images, just some videos, they look very fluffy and very abstract and without having any real effects, but actually they have real effects, so that's why they define the anchorages of power. It is not that the beautiful totality of the individual is amputated, repressed, altered by our social order. It is rather, yeah, so you see again, it is not the repressive model here. You see, ये देख रहे हैं आप लोग, जो पहले भी बोला था मैंने, it is not the repressive but the productive character of power. So it is not that the beautiful totality of the individual is amputated, repressed, altered by our social order. It is rather that the individual is carefully fabricated in it, according to a whole technique of forces and bodies. So that is that. And then there is an example of the Emperor Napoleon and all of that. And then finally, you see the last sentence of this para. Okay, so this is the thing about the monarch, the emperor as a monarch who is at one and the same time a usurper of the ancient throne and the organizer of the new state. He combined blah 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 blah. The pomp of sovereignty. You see, now these words should you should be able to connect things up now when you see these phrases. The pomp of sovereignty, the necessarily spectacular manifestations of power. They were all extinguished. They were done away with. They were all over. And one by one, what you have is the daily exercise of surveillance in a panopticism in which the vigilance of intersecting gazes was soon to render useless both the eagle and the sun. The eagle and the sun is more like those monarchs and all those powerful kings used to have those insignias, their emblems, their coat of arms. You see, उसमें eagle होता है. हालांकि I think still in the US, I think they still have the eagle. I think the US government का emblem में eagle है ना अभी भी.
Yes, sir.
हमारा हिंदुस्तान का क्या है? हमारा क्या emblem होता है?
अशोका स्तंभ है सर.
हाँ, हमारा तो अशोक का स्तंभ है. कितना बढ़िया है हमारा. ईगल, सन, ये सब क्या है? ये ऊपर गेज का है ना. तो ईगल जो होता है, ईगल है. ईगल क्या होता है? उसको क्या बाज बोलते हैं ना हिंदी में? चील.
Yes, sir. चील.
हाँ, चील. हाँ, तो वो चील बाज जो होता है ना, वो ऊपर से ऐसा करता है. वो आप भी उसको देखते हैं. वो दूसरा तरह का गेज है वो. फिर जो सूर्य जो है, सन, सूर्य भगवान, सन किंग, सन टेम्पल बोलते हैं ना, कोणार्क में, उड़ीसा में सन टेम्पल है. तो सन भी ऐसा कि पूरा सबके ऊपर रोशनी डाल रहा है ना. तो वो वाला एक रिश्ता है, ऊपर से नीचे टाइप का. तो लेकिन यहाँ पे उसको हटा के यहाँ पे विजिलेंस ऑफ इंटरसेक्टिंग गेजेस. So you can in a way say that the panopticism is about intersecting gazes. It is not about one big disciplinary thing, but it is about intersecting gazes, where the light is important, the visibility is important, right? So that kind of a thing. So as you can see then that we have moved slightly beyond the things that we did in the last class. So I think the notion of the soul is clarified today. What is also clarified is now I think we have tried to now study because earlier it felt like we were not really referring to the character of the politics, say, in a more direct sense, of power, because the panopticism model looked like slightly abstract and kind of disjointed. But today we talked about say the kind of a comparison between the old feudal monarchical kind of a logic of power and the logic of power in a modern democracy, where there are private individuals, where there are constitutional rights that the individual has. So in that kind of a context, what sense does it make to say that there is such a disciplinary mechanism of power which regulates the body, which modulates the body, which where power also where the citizens are themselves the bearers of the power. So it's not like the power is just working from outside, from apart, or from afar, or from on top, but the but this is something which passes through the body, and the bearers themselves are in a way involved in it. But the other thing also that we pointed out today is how the entire body polity is constituted, how the entire what we call republic today is constituted, right? Now, we see one story of how the republic gets constituted is the Constituent Assembly. We had a great freedom movement, right? And then everybody said, okay, now the British have gone and now we are free. So now let's all write a beautiful constitution with social justice and rights and secularism and everything for everyone, right? And then we constituted that, and then according to the constitution we have elections, and then there are governments formed. That is one kind of a story. There is one narrative, but that is a narrative which is being challenged here, you know right? In other words, it's not like that narrative is untrue or in that sense wrong, but it's as though there's another dimension that is attached to it, the kind of duplication and the doubling that we mentioned earlier, that this at one level it also looks like a fictional relation, which is the juridico-political theory, of sovereignty, right? Emphasizing on the constitution, emphasizing on rights, emphasizing on the law. But here we are talking about the actual techniques of power, actual mechanisms of power to which we are actually subject, and that is the dimension that is opened up by Foucault, right? So I think we have come some way. So so you guys, any questions or something you have?
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah.
So you said in democracy, subjection is the ability of the sovereign to enable life. Could you please explain that more?
Yeah, because the life has to be enervated, the life has to be excited, the life has to be incited, the life has to be made more okay, let's it has to be made more happening, so it's not through repression, but by exciting you in all of this, because you are not being shoved in darkness, right? You are in light, and you are also individualized. The private citizen is allowed. So it is so so your capacities Your capacities are increased. You are not suppressed. You are positively allowed to flourish. You know, and that's what happens, no? All this education, all this schooling, all of this are supposed to be for your good, for your own betterment, so it is enabling life. And the sovereign earlier used to show its power and consolidate its rule over the people, and the people would also, in a way, accept that, by controlling the power to kill, to take someone's life. So it was the power over death. So the public spectacle of someone being killed at the orders of the king, right? And where the crowd should also cheer, and they would love not just the beheading, but really gory torture and dismantling of the body, tearing apart the human body in front of everyone, really gruesome methods. But here today, that's not there, Here it is the power to give life that decides the sovereign. Now, of course, you can say, but don't you think that still, there is extraordinary laws, there's UAPA, still the state, or the power, whatever that power is, engages in real killings. So the US will go and bomb, people in Afghanistan. The Indian government will use force and the power to kill. You can of course say that, right? Which means that that's not completely gone. And yet, for the routine working, you might say, of democracy, the power of the sovereign is really through this kind of a modality, this kind of a system which is in place. And that's where the panopticon becomes very important, whereby it's by giving life, it is by increasing your powers that you do. And that's where the capillary comes, right? Because what is the point? And also, it's not efficacious to just kill someone, repress someone, make good use of him, right? He's a bright student, this, that, give him all the benefits, let him study, let him work, what's the problem in that, So this is what is called the smartphone, smart class, everything is smart these days. So this is also smart power, basically. So let's say this is smart power. Smart power, really it is really, really smart. It has Facebook face recognition. It has the smartest machine you can ever think of, It is Siri and, CD and what is that one from Amazon that they're selling? Yeah.
Alexa.
Yeah, all of that combined, but that the panopticon, it's already done in the 17th century. So not a repressive, prohibitive model, but one which enables. And because you see at the end of the, think about Marx, what does Marx say? How does exploitation really take place in Marx? Do we see some of these Foucauldian elements in Marx? Is Marx talking about exploitation in this crude way, like the way slaves are put to work? How are workers put to work in capitalism? Are there some disciplinary elements in that? You might want to think about that. Anything else?
So there was also something, the doubling happens with the king's body. I couldn't get that also.
Yeah, the king's body because of the rituals. Acha, hold on. There are some other questions. ये भाई क्या देख रहा हूँ मैं? Sir, can we say that in a way the concept of power is similar to the idea of, yeah. Well, yeah, that's what it feels like the soul is not really the power, but the effects of disciplinary power that creates something like the soul, that reality reference, that term, I think that's a good term that you should reference, like the mantra बोला था ना मैंने, एक तो जो जो रियल में जो कर्मकांड हो रहा है रियल में कर्मकांड हो रहा है ना, घी डाला जा रहा है, ये डाला है, लेकिन मंत्र भी बढ़ा जा रहा है। एक तरह का माहौल, जैसे आप शादी में जाते हैं ना, सब खाना लगा हुआ है सब कुछ है। अब ये सब मेरा, आई कैटेगराइज ऑल दिस इन माय बैड एग्जांपल दिस थिंग, बट जस्ट टू गिव यू अ सेंस शादी में सब कुछ ये रखा हुआ है, पानी भी लगा हुआ है, अच्छा अच्छा बिरयानी है, अच्छा अच्छा खाना है वहाँ पे, है ना। आप जो भी पसंद करेंगे सब बढ़िया है, सब अच्छे सुंदर सुंदर लोग हैं, सुंदर सुंदर ड्रेसअप करके आए हैं। उसके साथ ना एक म्यूजिक भी चलता है वहाँ, एक धुन, सेनाई सेनाई हाँ, अच्छा वो धुन जैसा है ये कि अब यहाँ पे जो पीट पाट के गुंडे मवाली का जैसा वो पब्लिक स्पेक्टेकल करते हैं थे पहले का राजा माँ, वो सब नहीं। अभी एक अच्छा मीठा धुन से आपको बिल्कुल एक जैसे बच्चे को सुलाते हैं ना, वैसे ही काम कर रहा है डिसिप्लिनरी पावर, समझ लीजिए। हाँ, या बट द माहौल, या माहौल क्रिएट करता है, बट इट हैज अ टेक्निकल, बट इट इज टेक्निकल, and really it is related to production, it's technical and production related. That's why that is the thing, and you see that even in Marx also has this notion of something which is at the level of mind or ideas or something, and yet and yet it is something which is generated, produced through actual technical processes. It is like a machine which thinks. Your mobile phone, for example, right? Right. So it is spiritual and material at the same time, and that is what the modern period does. So, for example, Marx talks about commodity fetishism. That's Marx. Like some So Marx's notion of commodity fetishism, it's a bit like that, where the commodity produces magical effects. Like say, आप जाइए ना, आप कहीं भी मार्केट में जाइए, आप देखिए मंदिर में जाते हैं, आप गिरजा घर में जाते हैं, आप मस्जिद में जाते हैं, तो बहुत ही आध्यात्मिक टाइप का एक पावर आपको मिलेगा, ठीक है। लेकिन मैं कहता हूँ आप मार्केट में जाइए, सरोजिनी नगर मार्केट जाइए, बड़े बड़े मॉल्स में जाइए, वहाँ पे जो लेटेस्ट रिलीज है ना, अभी लेटेस्ट रिलीज आया है अभी, जो भी है मोबाइल फोन का या जो भी है, उसको इस ढंग से सजा के रखते हैं ना कि आपको वो अट्रैक्ट करता है, वो आपको पुल करता है, उसका एक मैजिकल पावर होता है तो वो बस कुछ नहीं, वो एक कलियुगी एक माया है, वो एक कृत्रिम एक वस्तु है वो। मोबाइल फोन क्या है? कुछ नहीं है, कृत्रिम वस्तु है वो। इट्स अ डिस्गस्टिंग लिटिल
Attraction.
stupid thing, लेकिन उसका जो पावर है आपके ऊपर, अरे वाह वाह, कैसे आप मरते उसको पाने के लिए, आप घर में झगड़ के लड़के हाँ? मुझे वो चाहिए, उसको आप कैसे समझिएगा बताइए, समझ रहे ना? तो वो जो इंटरफेस है, so that is the thing. So the mahal is there, the soul is there, but the soul is completely with the techniques, with the actual production, with the way in which your body is constituted. And that's why you have regulation, modulation. That's why also the modality here is that of capillary, where the commodity, the thing that is kept there, it is not like somebody with a danda comes and says you must buy this. No, you yourself fall from it for it, yeah. And that is the capillary effect, if you like, you know. ठीक है, तो और कुछ है तो बताइए। We are.
Sir, there's a question that I want to ask.
Yes, yes. Please do. Please do.
Sir, this is from the last line on page number 199, and I didn't quite get the concept here. Like all
What
the
is it?
mechanisms, yes, sir, I'm reading it out. All the mechanisms of power, which even today are disposed around the abnormal individual to brand him and to alter him, are composed of those two forms from which they distinctly derive. And sir, I didn't get the idea. What is this two forms he's talking about here? Like I've read the paragraph before it, but I couldn't make the sense out of it. Two forms.
Oh yeah, I am on page 19. Tell me where is the thing?
So it is the second last line on page number 199. All the
Okay,
mechanisms.
this one. The constant division between the normal and the abnormal, to which every individual is subjected, brings us back to our own time. This one, right? By applying the binary branding.
No, sir. Actually, it is this. All the mechanisms of
Yeah,
power.
I'll come to that. I'll come to that. I'll come to that. Yeah. Binary branding, an exile of the leper to quite different objects, the existence of a whole set of techniques and institutions for measuring, supervising, and correcting the abnormal brings into play the disciplinary mechanisms to which the fear of the plague gave rise. All the mechanisms of power, which even today are disposed around the abnormal individual. All the mechanisms of power, which even today are disposed around the abnormal individual. क्या है ये? कुछ नहीं है इसमें. मतलब I mean you all know this. All the mechanisms of power which even today are disposed around the abnormal individual to brand him and to alter him are composed of these two forms. Yeah, even today you declare someone abnormal, you know, right? You put someone down by declaring someone abnormal. And that's a way to silence someone, saying that, oh, you are abnormal, you are किसी को बात पसंद नहीं है, कुछ है तो आप उसको पागल कह देते हैं, right? So the distinction between the normal and the abnormal, that is also one way of putting down certain people and allowing certain people to have to get a share of the bigger share, right? So yeah, so the normal and the abnormal, that is that's connected with the capillary form, that's connected with the because when you declare someone abnormal, you're not really using coercion. It is a soft power, you might say. It is like the soul working. It is like, oh, there's something wrong about you, right? So this normal and the abnormal and the norm, not just the normal, but the norm, that the norm is defined for you with subtle norms. And the norms are not rules. Rules are very explicit, no? You see, there's a difference between rules and norms. I can't see this. Difference between rules and norms. Rules are very clear. So the rules might stop you from something. That is the prohibitive model, no? Rules. Regulations. No, not regulation. Regulation might be something else. Regulation can be more minute, more manipulative, more capillary. But rules can be, okay, it applies to all. It's very clear. Either a yes or a no, So if it is not to your liking, But when there is a norm would be more like at a level of minutiae, at a micro level. कि आप वही कपड़ा पहने हैं, सब कुछ वही पहने हैं, लेकिन बोला जाता है कि आप तो भद्दा लगते हैं उसी कपड़े में, और वो वही पहन रहा है, उसमें वो बहुत बढ़िया लग रहा है. अरे भाई क्या है डिफरेंस? है ना? होता है ना. देखिए इंक्लूजन एक्सक्लूजन भी बोलते हैं ना. जैसे सोचिए मैं आया ऐसे गांव देहात से, मैं गरीब परिवार से हूँ, मैं दबा कुचला परिवार से हूँ, है ना। तो मैं बन गया बहुत बड़ा ऑफिसर। उसके बाद मुझे भी वो नौकरी मिला, मुझे भी सब कुछ मिला, मुझे भी वो एक्सेस मिला। मैं भी बड़ा बड़ा गाड़ी में चढ़ रहा हूँ, मैं भी बड़े बड़े होटलों में 5 सितारे होटल में जा रहा हूँ, मेरा पास भी पैसा है। लेकिन यार फिर भी ना मुझे ना वो एक्सेप्ट ही नहीं करते हैं वो, हाँ। क्योंकि वो उनका जो, जब पार्टी में जो सब लोग हैं, मैं भी हूँ, मुझे एंट्री तो मिल गया, लेकिन वो जोक्स जो बोलते हैं ना, मुझे समझ में नहीं आता है। ये बहुत ही सटल चीज है ना, देख रहे हैं ना, वो नॉर्म वाला। तो बोलते हैं यार तुम तो क्या ऐसा जोक्स में भी नहीं हंसते हो, तुम तो इतना एबनॉर्मल हो, बोल दिया। और उसके बाद ना अगले बार से हमको वो पार्टी में जाने का मन ही नहीं करेगा। मैं तो बहुत अमीर हो गया, बहुत बड़ा आदमी हो गया, लेकिन ना मैं वो पुराना गांव का दोस्तों को ढूंढ के वहीं उन्हीं के साथ मैं चिल आउट करूंगा। होता है कि नहीं ऐसा?
Yes, sir.
मैं नहीं जाऊंगा यार, चलो हो गया, ये लोग का बहुत देख लिया तमाशा, मैं अपना ही इसमें रहूंगा। क्योंकि ये एक तरह का ना, आप एक्सप्लेन भी नहीं कर पाते हैं ना, वो जो एक्सप्लेन भी नहीं कर पाते, वो जो नॉर्मल और क्या एबनॉर्मल उस ढंग से होता है ना, ये मतलब ये जो डिसिप्लिनरी पावर जो है ना, ये इस टाइप से का है वो। इसलिए तो ये हमेशा ही आप पे हावी रहता है करके है ना, पेनोप्टिकन का हमेशा डिस्पर्स मतलब हमेशा ही हावी रहता है आपके ऊपर। हमेशा ही वो जो लाइट का जो दिया है ना पेनोप्टिकॉन में, लाइट, हमेशा लाइट पड़ा है। तो अगर वो टावर अंदर में जो टावर है ना पेनोप्टिकॉन का, वो जो बिल्डिंग, वो जो आर्किटेक्चर में, वहां पे अगर कोई नहीं है आपको जो देख रहा है, आपको आपके ऊपर नजर लगाया हुआ है, फिर भी आपको लगता है कि शायद वो देख रहा है। देखा ना हमने ये पेनोप्टिकॉन का मॉडल में। तो मुझे लगता है कि मैंने हमेशा, मुझे कोई लोग बोलते हैं ना, कभी कभी दोस्तों में भी बात होता है कि मुझे लगता है कि हमेशा मुझे कोई जज कर रहा है, ऐसा होता है ना। तो हम लोग अक्सर जो जज कर रहा है किसी को, ऐसा पसंद नहीं रहता है ना हम लोग को। हम भी बोलते हैं कि भाई ऐसा क्या है, वो हमेशा जज करते रहता है, कुछ 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 टोकते रहता है। हाँ? वो जो टोकता है वो तो टोक दिया तो चलो पता चला उसका मन में ये है। लेकिन ये पैनोप्टिकॉन में तो वो बताता भी नहीं है क्या नॉर्मल है क्या नॉर्मल है ना, वो फिर खुल के भी नहीं बताता है। जो ऐसा टोकता है वो तो बता देता है ना कि भाई तुम्हारा ये नहीं है, भाई तुम क्या, तुम ऐसा, हाँ? जैसा फालतू से तुम, तुमसे नहीं होगा, तुम क्या, तुम गांव का आदमी जो भी है, हाँ? ऐसा, तुमसे नहीं होगा ऐसा। लेकिन ये तो बताता भी नहीं है कि नॉर्म क्या है, हाँ? आप उस हिसाब से चल भी नहीं पाते हैं, या आफ्टर अ पॉइंट आप भी बोलेंगे चलो भाई हम भी क्यों इसमें फंसना चाहेंगे। ठीक है ना। तो अच्छा, राजकिरण कौर, व्हाट इज योर क्वेश्चन?
Sir, I have a question from
Yeah.
page 117. It says we are much less Greeks than we believe. Can you explain what was mean by that? What is mean by that?
कौन सा, कहाँ पे, विच पेज?
217.
217? क्या है जी
Yes.
217 में? अब तो खत्म भी होएगा क्लास, अच्छा लगेगा, है ना, ये सब ऑनलाइन करना। अच्छा है। 217 में क्या है? 2217 में? अब बताओ, हाँ मैं भी देख रहा हूँ, हाँ बताओ कहाँ पे।
We are much less Greeks than we believe. The second para.
Oh yeah, what is this?
Can you explain what does that mean?
What this means, we are much less Greeks than we believe. Oh, that's a reference to the antiquity. हाँ, वो एंटीक्विटी वाला कुछ कुछ अभी भी चल रहा है हमारे बीच में, वो बोल रहा है। हाँ, वी आर मच लेस ग्रीक्स देन वी बिलीव। जो कि बहुत lot of people think, particularly in the West, they think we are carrying on the legacy of Athens and Sparta and ancient Greece. So he's saying, but we are not that much Greek, I mean, antiquity, the way Greek antiquity used to function and the way we function today in a democracy, modalities of power are completely different. So it means. Yeah, what does it mean to say body is trapped in the soul? Of course, because body is full of possibilities, no, full of potential. You see, in the earlier religious kind of discourse, the soul is one which has that full of possibilities. सोल आत्मा तो सब कुछ है ना, जैसे हिंदू धर्म में, वेदांत में सोल तो आत्मा तो सब कुछ है, शरीर तो बेकार है, ये तो माया है, ये तो बस एक तरह का फसाद है शरीर तो, है ना। आप लोगों ने वो गाना सुना है, वो माया महा ठगनी तो एक कबीर का है, दूसरा एक गाना है ना, वो क्या शरीर मत कहो ये शरीर तुम्हारी है, ऐसा है कि शरीर से अटैचमेंट मत रखिए, ये तो जाने वाला है, मत कर मेरी मेरी, ये शरीर नहीं है तेरी, मत कर, ये काया काया नहीं है तेरी, मत कर मेरी मेरी, काया काया बोलते हैं ना, काया सुना है।
Sir,
Yes,
sir,
Rajkar.
sir, I've typed the question in the chat box. There's some distortion of sound, so can you please check it out?
How does democracy justify this theft of individuality that, okay, that's okay. How does democracy justify this theft of individuality that never got to sort of germinate? How does difficult question पूछ रही है ये राजकिरण तो?
Sir, I've typed the text above also. So the justification that he gives.
Oh my God, you are increasing my work. Okay, let's see. How does democracy justify this theft of individuality that never got to sort of? No, it germinates. The individuality germinates. Don't forget that. But it germinates in a particular direction, right? So the question is the direction in which it is germinating under panopticon, under this disciplinary power, is it the same as it would have germinated were the disciplinary mechanism not there? You know, that is a question, and you are pointing in the right direction. Okay, so राजकिरण ने लिखा है on one hand, अच्छा ये लास्ट टाइम पुनीत याद आ रहा है मुझे, पुनीत का वही कहाँ वो जो थोड़ा हम लोग लास्ट में बात किए थे ना किसान आंदोलन को भी लेके, पुनीत है ना? Discipline, on one hand, morality is enhanced and individuals' behavior molded through correct training. Yeah, the correction of individual, also an owned individual, the ideas, thoughts exploited, making them predestined and conditioned, while maintaining the establishment being one of. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, while maintaining the being as though it's of democratic principles, but yeah, it's an owned individuality. It is conditioned. Yeah. No, you're right. You know, but that's the thing. You know, so how does one really get out of here? You see, how does one get out of here? But that's the question, you know, and that is something which Foucault addresses in his later works on the care of the self. You know, how does one then get out of this kind of also you know, what is called pastoral power. These are other words that are used, you know, pastoral power, which is like the जो भेड़ जो चराता है ना, चरावा जो होता है, वो कैसे अपना भेड़ बकरी को चराता है, शेपर्ड वाला pastoral जो पावर होता है, तो ये उस टाइप का है. And now with the rise of social media and algorithms, a lot of people also talk about algorithmic pastoral power, you know, because the algorithms are at work, right? In all this social media and all this, then they're kind of profiling you, they're following you, and they're giving you what they think you would love, right? So you're constantly being tracked through algorithms, but it is again done in a pleasing way, apparently in a pleasing way, pleasing to you. So that's why it's like pastoral, algorithmic pastoral power, you know. Yeah, Rajkiran, you get the point?
Sir, but why? Sir, then why is he comparing it with democracy?
No, because democracy is like that. That's precisely what democracy means.
Sir, so like, can the panopticon model be equated, sir, with how in the present times the technological procedures they have been getting the core hold of the core of human mind. So while they compartmentalize the human beings, like grading of individuals, but so individual never gets the sense of how he's being exploited. So is this some kind of link that we can establish?
That's right. But don't just look at it in terms of technology, because this is there even in the 17th century. There's a particular modality of power. Even if there's no technology, no internet, no nothing, no mobile phone technology, social media. But if you look at like the traditional, like I was telling you, that's why I told you that when you look at Delhi colonies, do you remember? I was telling you guys, Delhi colonies, Defense Colony, Malviya Nagar, actual neighborhoods, the way buildings are structured, the way neighborhood, the way the city is structured, that itself is a panopticon. Right? So you were right, technology, yes. But it's not that we needed this technology, this technology as in this social media kind of internet and all that. This is already, yeah. Yeah.
Myself, Manasvi, sir, I feel that this panopticon notion is a bit bounded rationality. Like Herbert Simon once said that a human being manages by mere satisficing, not means satisficing. He used the term satisficing for this thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
bounded rationality kind of an approach. So I feel like some loopholes are there.
Yeah, but point it out, open it up a little bit. What do you mean?
Sir, there is this 1 second, sir.
Yeah. In the
One
meantime,
minute.
yeah, in the meantime, anybody else? Because we are now going to soon end.
So,
Anybody else?
but hello, sir.
Yeah.
So
Kiran.
why we are
Yeah.
going so far? I mean, they have talked about technology, they have talked about the economical interdependence, about how it is going on, but why we are going so far? There is this concept that human mind itself, we are trapped by our own subconsciousness. Say, sir, for example, that we probably are encrypted or somewhere or the other restricted by our lower selves. We always listen to our lower selves, and that
Yeah.
somewhere or the other it exploits our higher self at the same time. So we are going so far, sir. Our mind has already have captured our consciousness. So does it really exist when it comes to
That's right. That's right.
phenomenology?
Oh, but Saksam, you are Saksam?
Yes, sir. Shubham, sir.
Saksam, yeah, you're right. You're right. The lower self, then there is this entire thing about the super ego, and the id, the instinctual level. So our lower selves are there. That is something which is there. But here we are trying to, but what Foucault does is also brings in the, the way, materially there is this particular arrangement, the distribution. Earlier there was this phrase that was used, the concerted distribution of materials, things. I mean, say for example, okay, let me give you a concrete example. I'm not giving you an example. Just think about this and think it for yourself. Say metro in Delhi. Metro. After metro came in Delhi, it changed the way people move around in the city, right? Earlier, if you are moving from Gurgaon to, if you are coming from Gurgaon to North Campus, you would think so many times if you were to do that because there was no metro. But today you will do that. Do I? It's easy. And now I'm not talking about one individual. Imagine an entire population of a huge city like Delhi. The very circulation pattern changes. Now that has definite effects. Do you want to think about that? Right? Now, Foucault is taking you to this level of actual movement. So now this is of bodies, the movement of bodies of humans because of metro. But if you were to think the amount of power that is consumed by the metro, you were to think the way, because people circulate in different ways, the way that has affected the lifestyle of people, the way that has affected the work culture of Delhi, the way that has also affected who is going to study where, it has affected things at so many levels. Now, do you think these kind of what looks like material lowly arrangements and rearrangements are happening at random? No, these are not happening at random. Some people at the top, powerful people who are more in sync with the logic of the system, they take these decisions whether there should be a metro or not. Right? So, Saksam, you're very right. You know, that dimension is very important. If we have some other occasion, we can talk about that. So, but yeah, I think you are hinting the right direction. That we are, the word you used is, I think, encrypted, right?
So
Yeah. So there is some kind of encryption, but don't forget that encryption presupposes that we are just a cog in the wheel, that we are just being directed by our lower selves or by some higher authority or a sinister power. But with Foucault, there is a kind of an interplay. It is not a one-sided thing. And that's where the excitement, and this comes to what Raskiran was asking, that there is a, that there's a, that this is compatible with democracy. Let's put it that way. It's compatible with rights and all of that. So it's a question of free will. So democracy seems to
Uh,
protect your free will and all
excuse me.
that. Yeah, Manasvi, yes.
Yeah, excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Magnification of subservience, or this, there is a kind of intellectual, cultural slavery to some extent that we encounter.
Yeah. Okay, intellectual slavery. Yeah, you can say,
Yeah.
but don't forget that again, there is this two-way thing. It's not like a one-sided thing. Everyone is dumbed down, everyone is just imposed all these things, and nobody has a
So
say.
it is technology kind of enslaves, sir. That's
Yeah,
the thing you're trying to.
technology also, and other things also. It's a smart thing, it's like it also involves you. It positively makes you happy in some ways, it's a multifaceted system. That's why it's a panopticon, that's why it is light, it is unverifiable, it is almost fictional, even though it has real effects. Okay,
Oh,
so
thank you.
yeah, okay, so we'll stop here. And so thank you, everyone. And
Thank you
Ashish,
so much, sir.
yeah, thank you so much. And students in Hindi, I didn't hear anything from you guys.